asked writers to confess their deepest secrets to me on BookFox, and I was really surprised at what they admitted. I got more than 300 anonymous confessions from writers, given through email, through a form on my website, and through DMs. And I narrowed them down to the most shocking and surprising 25. I have no idea who submitted them, and once you see some of these secrets, you'll understand why they wanted to stay anonymous. Especially the last 5, which I saved for the last 5 because they are wild. And if you want to submit a confession, there are instructions in the description below how to do that for my next confession video. Number 25. I told my husband that the angry, vengeful character in my new novel was based on a former boyfriend, but it really was based on him. Ooh, sounds like this is going to be a former husband soon. But you know, they do say to write what you know. 3 years after one of my best writing friends published her first novel for an ungodly amount of money, I still haven't read it. I forced myself to read the Goodreads and Amazon reviews until I could fake a conversation. This sounds like jealousy. I get it, we've all been there. But consider this, having friends publish successfully is way better than having strangers publish successfully. It means when you publish your book, now you have a famous friend to get a blurb from. I look down on everyone who has ever self-published as being an untalented hack. Oh, that's pretty savage. I guess if you've been burned by some really bad indie books, I guess I can understand why you would look down on them. I'd just say there are plenty of terrible self-published books, but there are tons of amazing ones as well. Kind of like the ratio between terrible books and good books in traditional publishing. I simultaneously submit to places where you are not allowed to simultaneously submit. What a rebel. What are you going to do next? Half-inch margins? Write in Comic Sans? Avoid quotation marks? I bought an app that offered phone notifications whenever someone bought my novel. And I lied to my wife and told her the constant dings were people texting me. You wanted to feel important because people were buying your book. Yeah, that's fine. But you also wanted your wife to feel like you were important. Oh, I have all these people texting me. Also, what's the name of the app? I wrote my first novel after my child died. And I actually told myself, for reasons of motivation, that by giving birth to a book, I could alleviate the pain. I'm so sorry to hear that. And yeah, writing a book does feel like giving birth in a lot of different ways. Thankfully, one of the great aspects of writing is that writing can be therapeutic. It can heal you. And I hope time and the process of writing can alleviate some of that pain. After writing short stories for more than 10 years, I still haven't published a single one. Writing is such a tough business. It is just brutal. But maybe short stories really aren't your jam. Sometimes it's perfectly fine to pivot, as they say in the tech industry, pivot to a new genre. Try nonfiction, try poetry. Remember the founder of KFC failed at a dozen businesses before he finally stumbled onto this fried chicken recipe and became a multi-billionaire. I told my boyfriend that I was going on a writing retreat for 3 days. But really, I just wanted to get away from him for a few days so I could decide whether I should break up with him. I feel bad for the boyfriend. And also we need an update on this situation. Did you stick with writing and throw out the boyfriend? Did you make that ex-boyfriend a villain in your next novel? Number 17, that trip to Panama that I told the IRS was for purposes of writing research? Well, let's just say my novel's set in Tennessee. Hey, I see no problem here. Maybe you'll use the Panama trip for the next novel, or for the one after that, or for a short story, or for a travel article, or maybe one of the characters in this novel lived in Panama previously. When you think about it, everything you do in life fuels your writing in some way. But if the IRS is watching this, I only take very justifiable deductions. Even though I write literature, I really think the movies, YouTube, and TikTok are where it's at. It's not really either or, it's both and, right? I love movies and TikTok and YouTube for the things that they can do, but I also love books for the things that only they can do. Books are cool precisely because they're not Hollywood or Instagram. They're these weird countercultural things, and I love them for it. All my rejections are recorded on an Excel spreadsheet in neat, tiny, ordered rows, and I have the total number memorized. You memorize that number because you're trying to shame yourself, but you shouldn't feel ashamed. Every writer has a ton of rejections. Remember that giant stack of rejections that Stephen King kept impaled on the nail? And then it got too heavy for nail, so he had to substitute a spike. He's Stephen King. He's got a number 2, but he doesn't recite it to himself at night. Let the number go. Let it go. You know what you should do? You should recite your acceptance number to yourself. After I got cancer, I never wanted to write again. It just seemed so pointless. I felt that way before, after I published my first book. I'd finally reached my goal and nothing much happened. But I take comfort in this quote from Gandhi. Gandhi said that whatever you do will be very insignificant, but it is very important that you do it. Even if only a few people read your book, you were meant to write it and they were meant to read it. I wrote a nasty anonymous review of a friend's new memoir. Okay, I mean, I've disliked friends' books before too. Don't tell them. But I did not leave a terrible review. I think that might have been crossing the line. Are you sure this is a friend of yours and not more like a frenemy? I plagiarized 2 sentences of my dissertation. Plagiarism is bad, full stop, don't do it. But 2 sentences? Only 2 sentences? If it's any consolation, that's way less plagiarism than the former president of Harvard. And since it's a dissertation, at least you can rest in the knowledge that absolutely nobody will read it. I buy all my books used on Amazon, even though I know I'm defrauding the author and publisher. Okay, it's funny. This is the only confession that I saw multiple times. Writers feel really guilty about buying books from Amazon. It's like they know they should patronize indie bookstores, they know they should shop at Bookshop, but they just can't resist those cheap prices of the Amazonian behemoth. I threw away 300 pages of the novel I've been working on for 3 years and still haven't told my agent. This is so common. J.K. Rowling threw away a book called The Private Joke and instead started to write some sort of book about this boy wizard. Stephen King threw out multiple drafts of Carrie before he finally figured out how to write it. When you tell your agent is gonna nod and say, yeah, that's part of the process. It's okay. It's okay. It wasn't exactly lying when I wrote that controversial scene in my memoir. Let's say I wildly exaggerated. What is the line between lying and exaggerating to make a good story? If you're confessing this, that probably means you crossed over that line. You just gotta watch out for getting James frayed and then have to apologize to Oprah. Every time I pay one of those $3 reading fees to a literary magazine, I roundly curse everyone on the masthead for being such greedy little effers. If you are submitting 3 to 4 stories to 30 or 40 magazines, it really starts to add up. But remember back in the day before electronic submissions, you had to buy a manila envelope, you had to buy a return envelope, you had to buy stamps, and you had to buy return stamps. Submission has never been cheap, and honestly, I'd kind of rather it go to the literary journal rather than going to the post office. Sometimes when I'm reading a children's book to my 2 kids, I feel like the children's author, using words my 3-year-old could understand, has written far better prose than anything in my novel in progress. Oh, I can feel this way while reading almost anything. So many books out there make me think this person is a way better writer than I will ever be. I hear ya, it can be depressing. But then I wake up the next morning and sit down at my desk and I do my best. At the last AW writing conference, I got propositioned by someone who knew full well I was married. And what did you say? Don't leave us hanging. Okay, because you sound offended, you probably didn't go through with it. And I have to admit, this is definitely part of writing culture. You know what they say about the 2 biggest writing residencies in the world, Yaddo and MacDowell? They say the work is better at MacDowell, but the sex is better at Yaddo. The rumor is all the writers are sleeping with one another. And drumroll please. Here are the very last 5 confessions. I left them to last because they are shocking. I haven't read a book in 6 months. Hey, you've heard of writer's block, right? Well, this is reader's block. Reader's block is when you just don't feel interested in books and you just can't seem to get into any books and you're just not reading at all. That is okay. It is a season. When you find yourself ready, just find an incredible book to slip back into the habit of reading. What I don't want you to do is to tell yourself you are not a writer because you're not currently reading. Just give it some time. I made more writing 1 erotica novel under a pseudonym than my last 3 literary novels. It can be so frustrating to make art. And fast food books are always going to make more money. If it's any consolation, even William Faulkner wrote pot boilers just to get some cash in his pocket. And then there's also Nicholson Baker, who writes both erotica and serious literary fiction, both under his own name. So it is possible to do both. I created fake Amazon accounts in order to leave glowing reviews of my book. I am almost more impressed than shocked. Amazon has all these really complex safeguards against people doing these kind of things, so like, I'm impressed you pulled it off. But you shouldn't do it, because ultimately you don't get that warm, glowing feeling inside when you read a review that you wrote. And I actually had a writing professor who did this and was totally unashamed about it. He was like, yeah, of course I left reviews of my own book because my own book's amazing. And we were like, don't do that. Please don't do that. 2, I can only write after I've had a few drinks and I'm worried about becoming dependent. You're right, it's always bad to mix art with alcohol. No great writer has ever written with alcohol in them. Well, I mean, other than Hemingway. And Fitzgerald too. Oh, and Faulkner, and Cheever, and Poe, and Steinbeck, and Capote, oh, and Kerouac too. Seriously though, I think the fact that you are worried about being dependent is a great sign that you're aware of the problem and are going to take steps to avoid becoming too dependent. I once borrowed a plot idea from a friend and she never talked to me again. You borrowed? You borrowed? I mean, it sounds like you kind of stole it, right? Hey, but I get it. We writers are suckers for a good tale. Almost every writer in the world has stolen a story from somewhere else, from myth, an anecdote, a local tale. Stories aren't owned, but in general, it's best not to borrow from those close to us. And if you have a confession that you would like me to include in the next video, send me a video clip according to the instructions in the description.